So tonight I'm going to be talking about whether earth energies could be contributing to your horse's health or behavior issues. Okay. Right, so this is me. I'm Kate Saunders and I'm an energy healing practitioner. I'm a certified emotion code and body code practitioner, and I'm currently finishing a healing remembered practitioner course. And this is me with my two beautiful horses. We live in Cornwall, UK. The bay is Aloha and Sarafina is the chestnut. And I'm really passionate about humans and horses all living happy, healthy lives. And I believe that we all have the ability to do this, and we particularly have that ability if we're living in an environment that allows us to thrive and be healthy. So a quick summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm just going to cover a couple of things to note before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty. I'll then talk a bit about what geopathic stress is. I want to cover a bit about my story with geopathic stress, mostly focusing on my horses, but it has also affected me quite considerably. But we'll try and focus mostly on the horses. We'll then just speak generally about potential effects on horses that I've seen in my horses at our yard, with my clients' horses. We'll talk about physical signs of geopathic stress in the environment, so you can maybe pick up a few tips as to how to spot it. And we'll then look at potential effects on people, because you are just as important as your horse, and it's good for you to look after your health as well as your horse's health. And then we'll talk about how to create a beneficial environment, ways you can do that. And then hopefully we'll have a time for a few questions, but if we don't, or if you have to go early, you can always email me if you have any. Okay, hope that's okay for everybody. So let's get started. So a couple of things to note. When I'm talking about energies that the earth is emitting, these geopathic stress energies, I might refer to them as non-beneficial energies because they're not benefiting us, or I might even call them noxious energies. So it's kind of like, poisonous energies. Now, with geopathic stress, you do need to be in it for a very, very long period of time for it to start having an effect on you. It's not a sort of overnight thing that you're going to be sick the very next day. But as I was doing some research for this presentation, I found this equation, which I thought was very useful. So it said the equation is radiation intensity. So what we mean by that in geopathic stress terms is, for example, if I found a geopathic stress line, I would measure how kind of toxic it was. And we measure it on a scale of 0 to -10, with -10 being kind of the most toxic. So you could be in a -2, and that's not going to have as much impact as in a -10. And then we'll look at exposure duration. And this is where we're really kind of looking at how long you're spending above that specific line. And this is why it's really important that we have healthy places to sleep for us people, and also for our horses. So we're going to be looking at, obviously, horses that are stabled. They can't move away from these energies like they would in the wild. So they might have a longer exposure duration to them. And then we've got the constitution of the person exposed. And by that, we're talking about, how healthy the person is that's above that line, because we're all different, we're all unique. We all have lots of different things, we're kind of carrying, like emotional baggage. We might be really healthy, might eat really well. All those kinds of things can impact our energetic aura. So we might have a strong aura, so we don't necessarily feel the effects of these energies, or we might have a weaker aura, and then that might mean we do feel the effects. And then the kind of end of the equation, what we get out is the resulting damage. I was going to change that word damage and I forgot, but really the resulting effect, what effect it's going to have on you. And the other thing I want to talk about here, just to point out, you might be hearing about new things you'd never heard of before. And it's not to kind of scare you, it's just all about awareness. Like now we're aware of something perhaps that's new, and perhaps it's going to be something that you can link into your life. Oh, I might be feeling this way because of geopathic stress. It might not relate to you at all, but maybe you have a friend who's got an ongoing problem with a horse, and then you go, oh, I heard about this, maybe you could look into that. Maybe they've exhausted all other opportunities, and this might be the kind of key for their horse. So that's something to bear in mind. And always remember that fear weakens our energetic field, so it's going to make us more susceptible to outside energies. So it's not about creating a state of fear, it's just all about awareness. We've got ways to deal with these things, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, energetic aura, or your bubble. So I like to say bubble because I like the word bubble. And what I mean by this is basically that our energetic field that surrounds us. Now, this image here, I'm kind of created it just to portray kind of different sort of healthy aura to maybe a more cloudy aura. And when I say cloudy aura, it's basically just kind of a buildup of stuff we've collected over our lifetime. It could be emotional trauma, trapped energies, negative energies, absorbed energies, could be these noxious energies from geopathic stress, all that kind of stuff that we can kind of be carrying that can have an impact on our energetic aura, and then that eventually might have an impact on our physical bodies. So down one end of the spectrum, it's like really a lot darker, carrying a lot of stuff, that horse and that person, and then we're kind of up the other end of the spectrum. And I talk about it sometimes like cleaning, over here we've got a cleaner energetic bubble, and then we've got a more dirty one over there that needs a bit of work. Now, for me and my horses, we were probably at the dirty end of the spectrum before I started doing a lot of work on myself and them. And now I see us more up at the clean end. So if we do get a speck of dirt, it's really noticeable, and which is why we've been feeling a lot of these geopathic stress influences. And then the last thing I want to point out is something called energetic cording. So you may or may not have heard of this. This is where we can have an energetic cord. Obviously, we can't see it, but it could be between us and an animal like our horse. It could be between us and a person. It could be between us and a place. We can have all these sort of kind of attachments or affinities with things. Now, it's my belief in the wild, horses will have a slight energetic cord with each other because they're working as a coherent group. They're all kind of looking after each other. If one, hears something, then wants to send that information energetically through the group, so everybody's aware. But that kind of doesn't work as well in the kind of environment we have them in. And I used to believe that, as an owner, you could have a small cord with your horse, but actually I've decided that doesn't work because it was hindering mine and my horse's healing. And basically what would happen is one of my horses would spook at something and I would feel it through my entire body because we had this cord. And really I want to remain in a state of calm because I'm not scared of the umbrella she spooked at, and I want to help her bring her back down to calm. So energetic cording is something I just want you to bear in mind. I go into more details about these things in another talk I did on my website if you're interested in learning more about them. But I want you to bear those things in mind as we go through the presentation. Okay, so geopathic stress. So this is what we're here to talk about. So geo is Greek for earth and pathos is Greek for suffering. So those words have been put together, and stress has been added, which basically kind of equates to the general term for energies that are radiating from the earth that could cause discomfort or harm to us humans or to animals or to even plants. And the earth has a natural electromagnetic field, and we're all kind of energetic beings. For the earth, it's 7.83 hertz, and this matches the range of human brain waves, which is called the alpha mode, I believe. And it's when we're kind of relaxing or meditating. And this is one of the reasons why when we kind of go out into nature, it's when we can kind of relax and just feel in a better state of mind. But when this beneficial electromagnetic field is distorted, it's then known as geopathic stress. And, you know, there's several theories as to why we have geopathic stress. A lot of geopathic stress you'll hear spoken about is due to water veins. So these will be kind of water veins underneath the Earth's mantle that are running, and they will be interacting with kind of fractures in the earth, minerals in the makeup of the rocks that are in that area. And the kind of flow will create a charge, will be a negative charge, and then those energies will beam up to the Earth's surface above that line. And they can go really high. They can go, you know, you can have this happening in a skyscraper, you know, that it's down below the Earth, but the energy is actually emanating up to the top apartment as well, sort of through all of them. Another thing people talk about is secondary radiation from cosmic rays. So cosmic rays from, you know, outside in the universe are hitting the Earth and causing radiation in these water veins. And then also we've got Earth energy lines that absorb human emotion. And then these can kind of radiate out in the energy lines. So, for example, sacred sites where people go to as a kind of pilgrimage or whatever you want to call it, they might go there because they're feeling sort of emotional turmoil, and they feel better when they get there because their energy gets kind of drained away into the earth, but it's got to go somewhere. So it actually flows out along all these ley lines, and, you know, could then have a potential effect on anyone who might live above them. And this is why I personally think it's, you know, we all need to take responsibility for our own kind of energetic vibration, you know, clearing it, raising our vibration so that can help the planet. And it's also important to note that these intensities have increased ever since our homes have been invaded by electromagnetic frequencies through electricity and then all these gadgets and devices that we've got. So they're also affecting us, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But it's not all bad news, because the Earth can emit beneficial energies as well. We can have spirals and vortices of beneficial healing energy. And these might be in places like spas, things like that, where, you know, you go for wellness, and sitting above those spots can be really beneficial for you. And geopathic stress has been known about for many, many, many years. You know, the Romans would actually if they wanted to build something, they would let sheep graze on the land first for about a year, and then they would actually check the sheep's organs to make sure they're all healthy, to ensure that the spot was healthy before they would build a building there. And similarly in Germany and Sweden, I believe it is, they actually check for geopathic stress before building houses, or I think in Germany, before they even sell a house, you have to have a geopathic stress check. I'm not sure, you know, if that's everywhere, but I've read about that, and, you know, it's obviously really beneficial if you're buying a new home to find out about that. Okay, so this image here is an image you might find if you do a bit of research on the net about geopathic stress. This one is mainly just showing water veins. I don't know if you can see my mouse. If you can, I'm kind of highlighting a water vein there. And this is all these lines here are water veins. Basically, so noxious energies can be emitted from these lines, but especially where they cross, it's almost like a doubling of that noxious energy. So those spots you really, really don't want to be kind of sleeping in or spending a lot of time in. This diagram is also showing damage to vegetation. This tree has got a tree cancer because it's growing above that line. Also, geopathic stress associated with accidents on roads. These areas can, for some reason, build up negative energy, and they can cause people to crash. Some people have been known to fall asleep at the wheel and at these areas. And then another thing to note is where they cross, you might also get lightning strikes. So that's very interesting. That actually happened on the farm where my horses were. Okay, so I've just got a list here. These are just a few examples of different types of geopathic stress lines we can find. We've spoken about water veins already, so that's quite a big one that comes up quite a lot. We can have earth energy lines, which are natural lines in the earth, but like I said, they could absorb human emotion, and that can travel along that line, as well as absorbing noxious energies coming up from the earth. Similarly, for earth energy channels, these generally follow ley lines. If you've heard of ley lines, they kind of feed the ley lines. We might have toxic lines. These are kind of man-made geopathic stress lines, which could result from fracking, said that right, or from mining. So kind of man-made things where they've kind of caused physical trauma of the earth. There's a lot of that to clear, and you could have lines of toxicity as a result of what's been going on, and perhaps what chemicals have been used in that process as well. A blind head spring, this is basically where spring is coming up, but the water's not going anywhere, so the energy isn't going anywhere, and it kind of builds in that spot, and it can feel a bit like a kind of a whirlpool, if you will. Now, a lot of sites and churches, sacred sites, might be built above blind-headed springs because of that energy, because it can feel a little bit of a kick when you go there for maybe a worship or whatever, and it kind of it's a bit inspiring. But then if you spend a lot of time in it, it can not be beneficial for you, and can contribute to sort of depression and insanity energies. We also have energy sinkholes. So this is where energy is draining away into the earth, and that can drain you. It can be very draining and cause you to feel tired and things like that. And then we've also got human intent lines. So these are lines that have been created by humans, kind of spoken about like a path that was always walked. So the energy has kind of stayed along that path. So sort of many years ago, people would follow these lines to navigate around the countryside. But also they can fill with noxious energies or human emotion. Okay, so I'm going to just talk a bit about my story, just keeping an eye on the time. Are they above, Leslie? They probably could contribute to something, yes. So Leslie just asked about electricity lines across the paddock. We had that too. Right, so my story, so this isn't the best photo of my girls, but I realized why I picked this one wasn't intentional, but this was a day they were having thermal imaging done. I only had a lower for about 2 months. That's the bay on the left. Safi had about 14 months at this point. And actually the thermal image showed that Safi had poor circulation in her legs. Now, I haven't actually had one done since, which I would like to do to see if that's kind of been solved now, but I imagine what we discovered was kind of linked to this. Now, it's a very convoluted story, so I don't want to get into all the ins and outs, but I'm just going to talk about a few things that we we encountered. And the first one was Safi refusing to come in from the field. And when Safi doesn't want to do something, she doesn't tell you quietly. She you know, she exaggerates. And so I had my, you know, sweet, beautiful horse turn into a fire-breathing dragon. And I noticed it was at a certain spot, and I was sure that there was something about this spot that she didn't want to cross. And Leslie, like you've mentioned, there were actually electricity pylons going above it. So I thought it was those. I actually did energy work on those, but we still had the problem. And I, you know, I just didn't really know what to do. So I did have an animal communicator who said there's bad energies, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to clear stuff. I don't know what else there is. And then whilst all this was going on, I was actually having problems in my home as well. And I was suffering from, you know, really low energy levels, depression, sadness, not sleeping great, a lot of the things that are common with geopathic stress, which we're going to talk about for people a bit later. Now, I spoke to a mentor of mine, and she said, have you checked for geopathic stress? And I thought, I haven't heard of that, so I might check it out. Now, I've been a client in the holistic healing space. I've been a student, and I'm now a practitioner in the holistic healing space for many years, you know, at least 10. And this has not been come up or been mentioned. So I had my house and the field and stables checked. And if we move on to this next slide. Oops. What you can see here, I'm hoping my mouse is showing. I don't know if anyone could tell me, because otherwise I'm not pointing at anything. But this field here is our field, always our field. And this line here is what we had to cross to come in, because the stables are over at the top. So this was a spot where Safi just kind of went a bit nuts. I even tried, I used to bring him in separately. I thought I'd try and bring him in together. And Safi still did it. I actually just let her go. I walked Elle down, and I'd look back, and it was like she was stuck in something, and her head was writhing, and I honestly wish I'd been able to video it, because it was so weird, and just so, yeah, it's bizarre. But obviously we found out that this there was a geopathic stress line there. Now, at this point, I think I'd pretty much been leaving them out, because I thought it's not fair on us, and, you know, I'm just going to leave them out until I figured out what's going on. And now, unfortunately for me, I was feeding them down here, right by this line. I was feeding them hay here, and then at one point I fed them hay here overnight, and they didn't eat it, but sometimes I put it down here and they would eat it. So that was interesting as well. So we got these energies cleared. We also worked on the stable block. So here, the yellow lines are water veins. The green lines are earth energy channels. We've got a toxic line here. So where I am in Cornwall, there's a lot of mining, and there are several mines around near where we are. Also, the land is clay. So I mentioned about how the minerals in the earth can contribute to geopathic stress. And this is where my horses were in this stable block. So Elle's stable was probably about here. So she had a water vein running through hers. The stable next door to her, this horse had reoccurring laminitis every year. So I thought that was interesting, because I'm not saying that the geopathic stress contributed to it, but it's going to be a factor that most definitely, you know, is a layer of that horse's issue. And yeah, the toxins coming up, he's basically got to deal with those toxins, and then other toxins as well, and then the grass, sugars in the grass. And, you know, the owner's solution, or they're told by, we're kind of informed about this all the time, keep them in their stable. And it's like, well, actually, that might not be the best place for them. So, it's very, very interesting what came out. So got all this cleared. I felt the change. I could feel the change in the energy. And I thought, great. We've got it made. We're going to go back to normal. And I had them in a different paddock for a bit that was closer to the yard, and we were going up and down like normal. And then I put them back into their old field. We were fine for a while. And at this point, I did have to bring them in because we're getting to summer. Elle has sensitive eyes, and there's lots of flies, and they just need to be in, particularly on those really hot days. And the problem started again. So I was like, oh my goodness, what next? So this photo here, this is just there was a very bad energy vortex here, and Elle would actually stand guard on it if she was left by herself. Bless her. An animal communicator told me she was a soldier in a past life, so she obviously knew what she was doing. And then this one, it's not very clear, but this is where they were eating over by that geopathic crossing point. So we were still having problems. So I was still having problems in my home, even though I've done lots of clearing of the energies there too. And I sort of asked the angels one day, I was like, please, can you help me with this? Because this is getting too much. And I came across a video that solved my problems, and I was so happy. So this was to do with natural earth grid lines. So these are natural grid lines in the earth, thought to arise from the earth's magnetic field. So Hartmann grid was discovered by Dr. Ernst Hartmann, and the grid lines run north to south, east to west. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how far apart and all that, but just to be aware of those. And then we've got Curry grid lines, which run northeast to southwest, northwest to southeast. Now, so these are naturally occurring, but the crossing points, particularly of a Curry grid, if we're sleeping above those, then that can potentially be detrimental for your health. And there's a really good book about that called Earth Radiation. But what makes them significantly worse, I found out, was if your electric fuse box is placed on a Hartmann grid line or a Curry grid line. So this blue blob is supposed to represent your fuse box. And what will happen is that electricity, the charge from that electricity will kind of infect these lines within your home, or in the stable yard or wherever it might be. And it then kind of just bounces off the walls, and you've basically got these negative lines running through your home. And what I've also found out was they will be affected by the energy of whoever's above them. So for Eloa's had a lower vibration than Safi, because I've done more work with Safi, and hers were kind of dirtier because they were kind of, we kind of shed our energy into the earth. But in this case, it was shedding into the earth and infecting it and making it worse. So you kind of get into a bit of a, what's it called, spiral of just, you want to get rid of your energy, and then it's like coming back to haunt you kind of thing. So what can we do about this? I discovered something called a tensor ring. So tensor rings were invented by a gentleman called Slim Sperling, who's sadly no longer on the earth plane, but his wife is carrying on his work. His company is called Light Life Technology. And placing these rings, they're basically copper wires, that are two copper wires twisted together into a ring, and there's certain specific geometric lengths that they need to be, and when you create that ring, it will create a positive charge on either side of the ring, and if it goes over a fuse box like so, it will neutralize it. So then it will neutralize the grid lines in your home. So I just want to say, if you take anything away from this today, let that be it. Just use one of these. If you're somewhere where you've got a have a smart meter. You can buy smaller ones that just go around your smart meter, so that it can just help the energy in your home. So I kind of had to break back the layers to kind of get to the very bottom of the problem. But like I say, that's quite an important one. Now with the girls, I couldn't do this in their stable block, but you can, if you can't put a ring around the electric grid, you can neutralize the grid lines. So you can dowse for them with dowsing rods, and you can neutralize them with copper rods. So I put copper rods under the stable mats. And the day I did that, it was really funny because another horse was watching me, and he was so interested in what I was doing. He was just staring at me intently. So yeah, and that helped so much. Girls were happy to come in. It was just like, everything had, really helped. Okay, so that's my story. And so I want to talk now just a bit generally about potential signs and effects that geopathic stress can have on our horses. So I put here that stable, and what I mean by that is if you're on a livery yard, where there's lots of horses, you might have noticed, or maybe not, but maybe now you will, that there's a certain stable or a couple of stables where horses always are susceptible to perhaps the same issues. They might be healthy when they calve. They never had that before. Over 6 to 8 months to a year, they then are now suffering, and it might always be that particular stable. So that's something to look out for. Seasonal issues for stabled horses. So here in the UK, it's often that a lot of horses that are on livery yards might not get to be turned out at all. In some, I never thought that was a possibility, but it is, unfortunately, or it might be just for an hour or two. So they're actually spending a lot of time in those stables. And now if the stable is suffering from geopathic stress, they could develop behavioral, physical issues, perhaps just over the winter. And we do hear a lot of people saying, my horse is so anxious and spooky over winter because they're not getting out and burning off that energy. But it could also be contributed to by these geopathic stress energies, which will have an effect on the nervous system. Or they could have, we used to have a horse that would always get a cough over the winter, and it's because he was spending more time in his stable than in his field. So there could be some things where, they actually only get that over the winter. And if that's the case, then perhaps that's worth investigating. And the other thing is we have the whole spring grass, laminitis, what have you. So if you've got your horses stabled quite a lot over the winter, then going out on that spring grass, they've been dealing with these toxins from the geopathic stress potentially, and then now they've got to deal with sugars. It's like an overload on the liver, and it's like they can't keep processing it all, and we get that build up in their hooves, and hey presto, laminitis. So yeah, like I say, just something to bear in mind and think about. Okay, stabling issues. So some sort of stereotypical behaviors like crib biting or wind sucking or weaving could be because they're just trying to cope with these energies. Also, you might have horses not wanting to go in their stables, horses barging out of their stables, agitated in their stables, unable to settle. They could be sleep deprived. They could be pinned up to one side. This was what Elle used to do. She used to be like pinned up to the side of her stable, just trying to avoid the energy. Her stable used to be a complete mess. You hear about horses that are just so messy in their stable. And I realized it was because she couldn't settle. And then once I cleared it all, it was fine. It was just, the usual mess. Similarly, you might have that a horse never settles in an arena. If you've got, like floodlit arenas, maybe you've got, these electric Hartman grid lines being affected. They could spook in certain spots in the arena. It might always be the same spot, and you're like, oh, my horse always spooks there, and you're trying to kind of work them through it, but it's like, well, the energy is always there until we clear it, and the horse can feel it, the horse can sense it, but maybe you can't feel what the horse is feeling. We might also have that happening on hacks or treks. You might have certain spots where your horse is, bolted off with you, or run away from you. It happened with Safi. Turned out she was running along a water vein she couldn't get away from, so she took off. And then we've also had horses unsettled in the field, jumping out of the field and spooking at water troughs because they're trying to get away from the energy. Okay, I mentioned sleep deprivation, might have overeating, overweight. Elle would do this. For her, eating was a way to deal with the energies, like comfort eating, but also eating, we can store fat, which is going to store the toxins in the fat as a way of kind of getting them not into a safe place, but just getting them out of the system. I mentioned laminitis already. They might not drink enough fluids. Safi stopped drinking water in a stable, basically had 0 energy level because of the geopathic stress. Geopathic stress will affect the immune system and the nervous system potentially, and it might cause difficulty to heal from cuts or wounds. Might have slow hair growth, slow hoof growth. And then also another one to mention is miscarriage or fertility issues. If you do breed, or anyone who does breed and they might have had a mare who always miscarries or miscarries several times, geopathic stress could be the reason. And I've kind of been focusing on the stables here because it's kind of the place where the horses can't get away from. But like I mentioned before, I was feeding my horses in spots where there were geopathic stress in their field. So it's important to have that kind of checked as well. And I had a client who had a track system, and really wonderful, amazing, but the horses didn't like a certain section of it, so they tended to try to not use it, and we found a geopathic stress line running along the corner of that field. Okay, so where are we? Okay, so that's everything I'm going to talk about for horses. I'm going to talk now quickly about, I'm just conscious of the time, physical signs of geopathic stress in the environment, which you can spot and then think, oh, maybe there's something going on here. So this is sort of particularly, is linked to where your horses are, but we can use this for our own homes as well. So there are animals that like geopathic stress zones, bees, wasps, snakes, mosquitoes, flies, also fungi, bacteria, and mold. Moles like geopathic stress, and also ants, if you've got ant hills or ant nests. Cracks in buildings or foundations, in the bricks or in the structures. Areas in your home or in your barn that could be inexplicably damp. I've mentioned constant electrical breakdowns like light bulbs blowing. That could be a sign of an issue. We've got malformed trees, so like this tree cancer on this tree. Trees might not bear fruit. They might grow away from the line, like a crooked line here, a crooked tree here. But it's important to bear in mind that some trees and plants like geopathic stress, some don't. I'm not going to go into that detail, but that is a possibility as well. And I mentioned about geopathic stress hitting lightning hitting geopathic stress crossing points. Okay, so there's some things to look out for. Okay, and then effects on people. So it's quite a long list here. I'm just going to quickly read it out. So we've got insomnia, unable to sleep is insomnia, grinding teeth during sleep, upon waking feeling tired and general fatigue that you can't shake, always feeling ill, not being able to shake off viruses, colds, My brother had post-viral fatigue syndrome. So in the house I live in now, I've lived here for 4 years, just over. This had geopathic stress, and my home previous with my mum also had geopathic stress, a lot of it. And whilst we were living there, this was a while ago now, maybe 10 years ago, my brother got very ill with a virus and couldn't shake it off. He was off work for a year. Turned out where he was lying on the sofa to get better was a geopathic stress line. So it was kind of no wonder he was struggling. Feelings of stress or depression. Biggest emotions I see in my clients associated with geopathic stress are kind of emotions of forlorn or lost or sorrow. We also might get insanity energy. What was I going to say? Oh, I've forgotten. Never mind. Okay, carry on. Nausea in the morning, sometimes even vomiting when you wake. Night sweats, nightmares, feelings of anxiety and unwillingness to leave the house. Unexplained headaches, low energy levels. Babies are moving around in their cot, not sleeping well. Babies are a really good indicator if there's an issue. You know, they will be crying and screaming and not being able to settle, and they might, like Elle with the stable, it might be like pinned up against the side. So one thing you can do is just change where they're sleeping as like a test. Do they sleep better in this corner? Same for us. We can go, I'm going to move my bed. If I'm suffering from any of these types of things, I'll move my bed and I'll see what happens. And it's just like a little experiment. It doesn't have to be forever. Is this going to make me feel better or not? Children insisting a monster lurks in their room, or a feeling of presence in the bed. Rheumatism I've suffered from all of my life. I believe I've lived in geopathic stress all of my life, but now I don't get hardly any rheumatism. Hormone problems, miscarriage and infertility problems, so we've talked about that for the horses as well. Okay, now the reason, like I say, it's really important for you to think about your health as well as your horse's health. And like I mentioned earlier, we talked about this energetic cording. Energies flow from you to your horse if you have this energy cord. You know, ideally we don't want to have it, and we can clear these. But you know, it's possible that you're suffering from it in your house. Hopefully it's not fallen down like this picture. It's a bit of extreme. And you're suffering from it, and the noxious energies you're taking on, you could be sending to your horse, just unintentionally, unconsciously. And then your horse is having issues and you're thinking, what's going on with my horse? And you're trying everything. And then there could be this energy cord that is causing that to happen. And kind of the root cause of it all was your house. This was how it was for me. I've suffered from back pain for many, many years, since I was 13. And tried everything, you name it, I've tried it. I don't know how much money I've spent, and all I really needed to do was work on my home. So okay, so what can you do to help create a beneficial environment? Some of these are really obvious, but we're going to say them anyway. Clear clutter and dust. You know, if you've got stuff around not clean, it can prevent energies from flowing. It can trap you know, low level energies, particularly in the dust. I don't know if you use sage, but that's why we do the corners, because dust can kind of congregate there. Ventilation is important, because particularly in the winter, because if we've got noxious energies coming up, then we can let them out through the windows. So for your horse, reduce stabling time if possible. So I know that it's not always possible. So if not, then you might want to look at other ways to make that area for them more beneficial. And for you, you know, moving your bed, if you believe that could be a problem, you know, where you work, your desk, you could have issues there. In your workplace, you might have heard of sick building syndrome, or in children's schools, you know, it's been known to contribute to sort of ADHD in children and kind of like naughty children, but it's like they don't want to sit in that spot because it's not nice for them. Like I mentioned, look into tensor rings and other light life tools which can help with neutralizing these energies, particularly that one for your electrical unit. I'm very passionate about that, but I really, really recommend that. Crystals can help. So crystals like amethyst, rose quartz, shungite. But with those, if you are using them for certain spots, then you kind of do need to know what you're doing. I'm not an expert with crystals, so that's not something I know too much about, but they are something that can be used. Learning about geopathic stress and clearing it yourself. So you can do this, you can learn how to do it, learning how to dowse. And this is a really good book. There are a few books, but this is one that I found was just very comprehensive, really, really good book called Heal Your Home 2 by Adrian Incledon Weber. And he's also been very helpful to me in my journey. And like I mentioned, working on clearing your own energetic baggage, because this will affect the earth. It will kind of affect, the energy lines and things like that. So just by doing a bit of energy cleaning for yourself, you can help the earth, raising your vibration. I mentioned it already, looking after your liver. I think I mentioned it, maybe I didn't. Looking after your liver. I'm very, very passionate about looking after your liver. I think it's like, you've got your brain, heart, and your liver's like another really most important organ. So that's for you, and that's also for your horses. For my horses, I give them a liver tonic. Yeah, so I was just ending with saying, get your home cleared by a professional. So this is something that I do, and I am able to do that for you. Oh, come back online now. That's really weird. And you can find more details on my website, beonehealing.com. Let me see if I don't know how to work this now. Oh, I see. Yes, so you can go to my website if you're interested in finding out how I can help you with this. It was going so well. Okay, yeah, so last slide. Those are the resources. And those are the books: Heal Your Home 2, Silent Killer Below, and Earth Radiation, and my website, beonehealing.com. So if anyone has any questions, you can pop them in the box. Or if that's it, thank you so much for joining me and taking part in the presentation. I hope you've learned some new things that can help you, help your horses, or help anyone else you might know.